So, what is Galatians about? The letter to the Galatians. First of all, where is the Galatian church? And that's a trick question. Yes, Sister Margaret. Where's Galatia? Modern day Turkey. So that central part of Turkey, which used to be called Asia Minor in that area and those towns formed the area known as Galatia. So when Paul is writing this book, he's writing it to different little towns, home churches that were standing up. He was writing it to them, okay? What was he writing to them concerning? Be more specific.
They were saying that you could be, you were saved, but you had to do this. You had to go back.
So they were being taught, okay, they were being taught that, hey, yeah, it's faith in Jesus Christ, but you also have to do some works. You have to be circumcised. You have to follow the Sabbath. You have to keep the feast. You have to do all these things, right? Did Paul like that? No. Why? What is your salvation dependent upon? Christ alone. He gets full, 100% uncontested credit. Christ does for your salvation. He does not need your help to save you. What he does need is your submission to him and what he did for you. Okay, that's what you just got to call on the name of the Lord and say, hey, can you please stand in for me? Right? When he saves us, we call it saving, when he justifies us, right? Does he justify every part of us, our flesh and everything? What does he justify? Our souls, and he seals it. He adopts us into the family. He removes us from under the law, right? So he does all of that. So we're still in this fallen nature, which means we still do what? We still make mistakes. We still do those sins, right? The things I want to do, I don't do. And those things I don't want to do, I find myself doing those things. And so Paul really gets in depth with those things. What was the title of the people that we've been using, of those that were teaching the Galatians that they had to do works as well for their salvation? Judaizers. Very good, very good. And he went back to the Old Testament, Paul did, and he gave some examples of who, to show them that faith is not by the law, but grace is by God. Abraham, right? He talked about Abraham. He said Abraham was a Gentile. This was before Jews were even thought of, right? And God called him, and because Abraham trusted him, not because of any works, but he believed God, and God counted that for righteousness. So today, if we believe that Jesus died on that cross, that he was buried for 3 days, and that he rose again on that third day, according to prophecy, according to scriptures, if we really believe that and call on his name, God counts it as righteousness. Christ's righteousness is placed upon us. So that's what Paul is writing to them for. That's what it's about. It's about people trying to follow the law on top of having faith in Jesus. And it's like, why are you doing that? He removed us from all of that. Okay? And in chapter 5, which is tonight, he's going to explain it a little more in depth. If there's one thing you should have no doubt about after reading the book of Galatians, it's what? Sum it up for me. Christ alone. Not works. Not you following the law, not you being under the law, not you being circumcised, or Christ alone. Believing in what he did, the gospel. All right. Any questions up to this point? Any questions y'all have? Or did everybody study chapter 5? Or at least read it? Good. A lot of head nods. I like that. We're going to see Paul be very blunt in this chapter, as one of my sisters has already explained to me, which I know exactly what she's talking about, and we'll get to that. We probably will not get through the whole chapter 5, because whenever we get towards the end of this chapter, he starts talking about the fruits of the flesh, but also the fruits of the Spirit. And I want to take some time to make sure when we go over those, we know what we're talking about. Okay? We know what we're talking about. So without further ado, and I have already prayed, let us go to verses 1 and 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, a couple verses at a time. And then at the end, I'm going to read those verses again and see if it makes sense to you after being taught what it means. Does that make sense? Yeah? I do ask that a lot, don't I? Does that make sense? Okay. I want to make sure it does. Otherwise, I might as well be speaking French up here if you don't understand what I'm saying, right? Okay. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free. And be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Let me read that one again. That was too long of a pause. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free. And be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. When he says, do not be entangled again with the yoke of bondage, what does that mean? What does that mean? The law. Is the law bondage?
Yes.
Y'all remember growing up and the things we were taught? Did it feel like you had handcuffs on? You can't do this. You can't do that. Don't mow your yard on Sunday. Don't go fishing. Don't buy anything on Sundays. Pick your feet up when a storm comes. All kinds of stuff. Oh yeah. Get your feet off the floor. Don't go in the bathroom. Y'all have heard that one. That may not be anything with this, but just some of the things that we're taught growing up. So, but how did you feel as a teenager growing up in an environment where you had handcuffs and you were like, I love God, I've learned about Him, but I find that I'm an evil person. I am sinful. I got to wait and clean myself up. I've got to get clean before I come before the Lord.
That's also discouraging.
It's very discouraging. How can you have joy when your salvation depends on you? You can't. So the yoke of bondage, that's why Paul referred to it as the yoke of bondage. Which man, besides Jesus, fully followed the law completely and perfectly? Goose egg. No. What about the Jews? Especially the Jews. So what makes some people today think they can do it? It is the gospel, the faith in Jesus Christ that makes a Christian free. That's what Paul's saying. The thing that gives you liberty, the things that gets you free, is not you following the law. It's Jesus Christ made you that way when you accepted what He did for you. And He's saying, since you've been made free because you believe in Jesus, why would you want to go and be in bondage again? Why would you want to go back and be under a law? Why would you want to do that? It doesn't make sense. If you choose to follow the law, that is righteousness by works, in order to be redeemed, then Christ's sacrifice becomes of no effect to you. Does that make sense? That's like if somebody coming and saying, how much do you owe on your car? $10,000. All right. I'll pay all of it off for you. Okay. But I'm going to work for the next 4 years to make enough money to pay that $10,000. Well, I just told you I would pay it for you. I know, but I want to work for it. And I want to, okay, well, you don't need my money. My money ain't going, you're using your money to pay for the car. Mine's no good. That's kind of what Paul is saying here. Christ shall profit you nothing. Christ will profit you nothing. If you're going to try to do it on your own, then, And you have to ask, why do some people want to follow the law? I wrote down a couple of things. To say you made it to heaven on your own merit, that's scary. Boy, that makes me quiver. But some people, if they do what's right and they don't mow that yard on Sunday and they go to church every Sunday and they don't lie and they don't steal, I made it to heaven. Ooh, that gives me shivers. What do you tell Jesus? What do you say to him? He says, hello. You're like, I made it, Lord. You made it? You made it? I wonder what God the Father has to say about that. How about to say you helped Jesus get you to heaven? Jesus does not need your help. He does not need your help. All throughout the Old Testament, we find that no one was able to follow the law completely. Only Jesus was the only one. He was the only pure and perfect one. And these first two verses summarize the theme of the whole book, which is the difference between bondage and freedom. Christ gets the credit of great liberator. He's the one that set us free, not us. He set us free. Paul tells the Galatians and to us to stand fast in the liberty which Christ provided. Don't you leave that liberty. Stay in that liberty. Do you know why? Because in that liberty, you are free to worship. In that liberty, you're not worried about burning in hell. In that liberty, you can find joy and maintain it. Once the Galatians were in bondage to heathenism, from which they were set free by Christ. You see, they were in bondage too to Zeus and all these other religions. They had things they had to do. Christ set them free as well. But now, the Galatians, they're in danger of being enslaved again under the Mosaic law. And so Paul was trying to warn them. In verse 2, Paul was not saying circumcision prevented someone from being saved. Let's read verse 2 there. Behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. I can imagine there's probably pastors and teachers out there that say, if you've been circumcised, Christ can't save you because of that verse. Because if you read it, look at it. If ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. But that's out of context. That's what I'm saying, out of context. That is not the meaning here. He's saying, look, whether you're circumcised or you not circumcised, that doesn't do anything for you.
And he says that in the next chapter.
And he says it further down in this chapter.
Right, in 6:2, and he makes it clear. That's what I'm saying. You can't pull a verse out.
That's right. You can't. Some people like to pick and pull. You can't do that. You have to look at the context. Okay? You got to look at the context. Rather, he was opposed to the legalist theory, law followers, right, their rules, which insisted that circumcision was necessary for salvation. No, it is not. Anyone who was circumcised for that reason added works to faith and demonstrated that he had not exercised saving faith in Christ. How about baptism? Is that required?
No.
How about communion? What else is required besides believing in Jesus and what He did? Nothing. You got to confess. You got to repent. You got to tell somebody, right? Is that part of the gospel? Right. Yeah. Should we tell? Yeah, absolutely, we should. And some people will take certain verses. One verse is here where it says, confess the Lord as your Savior. Yeah, you should do that. But that's not a requirement for salvation. Okay? A lot of people's like, well, they went to the altar and they gave their life to the Lord, but they ain't told nobody, so it ain't final. Yep, that's not true. That's not true. It's the gospel by which we are saved. Because when we start saying you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this, we're doing the same thing the Judaizers were doing to the Galatians. It is by Christ alone and that faith in Him. Verse 3, I'm doing it by itself. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised that he is a debtor to do the whole law. What does that mean?
That means you need to go back and keep the whole law then. If you're going to, if that's got to do, you got to do everything else.
The whole law. How many grew up following the 10 Commandments and the law, but you didn't do all of the law? Well, no, we did all the law. Really? You went to church on Sunday? Or did you go to church on Saturday? Which one's the Sabbath? Saturday. Did you mow your yard on Saturday? Yes. Because see, if you're going to make it to heaven by following rules and not making mistakes, you've got to follow the whole law. You're indebted to do the whole law, all of it. So that's a big thing. That's a big thing. That's, I know people that preach that say you will lose your salvation if you sin and if you do this and you got to follow the law, and they're circumcised or they're not circumcised. Brother, I hate to tell you. I know you're about 65, 70 years old, but if you're going to make it to heaven by following the law, you got to follow all of it. Because if you're guilty of one, you're guilty of it all. If you break one, you break them all. It's imperfection. Period. Christ's way is perfection because Christ perfected it. In addition to the fact that turning to the law ruins grace, it also creates a new obligation, an obligation to obey the whole law. James echoes this in James chapter 2, verse 10. For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. So all those people that are preaching you got to do works, you got to follow the 10 Commandments, you got to follow all these laws to make it to heaven, for your justification. Then if they mow their yard on Saturday, they're guilty. Period. They're guilty of all of them. All right. Not only do you have to keep the 10 Commandments, but you also have to be circumcised, not work on Saturday at all, and keep all the feasts ordained by God. Feast of Tabernacles, right? Pentecost. There's a lot of feasts. Are you keeping those? You can't pick and choose which laws you want to follow. Pork. You didn't eat no bacon, did you? And here's another thing. You see, part of the law was the sacrificial system. I hate to tell people this, but there's no more sacrifices to be made. God will accept no more sacrifices. Period. Even if there is a baby born today and they never break any commandment except for maybe one thought or something, guess what they can do to make? There's no more sacrifices. They're not accepted. Not accepted. The last sacrifice that was acceptable to God is Jesus Christ, His Son. Period. And that's the sacrifice that you have to call upon. Period. That's it. Verses 4 through 6. Christ is become of no effect unto you. Whosoever of you are justified by the law, ye are fallen from grace. For we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. For in Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. These verses reiterate what Paul has been saying all along, okay? And I'm not going to go back over those key points about circumcision. I've already talked about that. But there's a phrase in here that catches our attention. What is it? Ye are fallen from grace. What does that mean? Yes, it's like you're walking away. Now, does that mean you lose your salvation? No. No, that is not what it means. Rather, it means a person that tries to follow the law has alienated themselves from Christ. They would not be living in a sphere where Christ was operating. They would not be living a free life where they could worship in a way God wants them to worship. Well, what does that mean, preacher? Give us one of your analogies. Well, I'm glad you asked for one. Because I like to give you analogies, right? Because I really want you to understand. Let's say you get saved through faith in Jesus Christ and what He did on the cross, the gospel, okay? You earnestly accept Jesus Christ. Someone in a religion or a certain church convinces you that you have to also follow the law in order to get to heaven. They say that if you sin, you lose your salvation. The result is living in a constant state of sadness without joy, thinking your salvation depends on you. You've left grace. See, in grace we have liberty. There's no more handcuffs. There's no more, we're free. We're not under the law. And then when we go back, we've left grace. Ye are fallen from grace. You've left that state of grace, and now you're back in the state of law. Your spiritual sphere is one of bondage, restriction, and sadness. I got another analogy. Let's say, and I was going to say, let's say someone buys you a $250,000 home and gives it to you. But no, that wouldn't be equitable. As a matter of fact, there's no price that would be equitable to what Christ did. But let's say someone said, hey, here is you a $250 million home. And it's yours. And they take you in there. They show you the 15 bedrooms, fully furnished. They show you the 10 full bathrooms. They show you a magnificent kitchen with every appliance. They show you decks. They show you maintenance buildings where you keep your tractors fully stocked. You've got a pool for days. You got a half-acre swimming pool. You've got trees. You've got orchards. You've got 5,000 acres. And they're like, this is what I am giving you. See, when you fall from grace and you go back under the law, it's like you've been given all of this and all you do is stay in your bedroom and you never leave it. All that freedom, all that's given you, and you decide, hey, I'm just going to stay in my bedroom for the rest of my life. Jesus saves you. If you go back under the law, it's like you're leaving liberty. You're leaving everything. Christ says, hey, you're free from all of that now. I have set you free. And who Christ frees, oh, He's free indeed, right? He will free you. He will free you. After being saved, you are given liberty. If you choose to obey the law, it's like giving up the most important aspects of salvation that Christ has given to you. In contrast, true believers by faith, not works, eagerly await the consummation of their salvation. You see, we're not in our final form. Did you know that? We are not in our final form. We eagerly await. We have faith. That blessed hope. He's coming back for me. And He's going to finish what He started. That transformation. You see, we are to be transformed into the image of Christ by yielding to the Holy Spirit, denying the flesh. Right? That's what's supposed to be happening. It's called sanctification, right? To be yielding into the Spirit. But at that time, when Christ comes back, the righteousness for which we strive will be fully realized. That glorified body where the presence of sin is completely removed. No more temptation to sin. No more thoughts of... No, gone. He removes this old deadness from us, the dead man remnants. He removes it from us. We will be completely conformed to all the requirements of God's will. Whew. The inward transformation which began when you got saved will fully develop into an outward righteousness at glorification. God will publicly acknowledge all believers' full acceptability with Him. You see, when we get up there, God's going to be like, I see my son, his righteousness. Well done. Come on in. I see my son's righteousness. Wow, y'all look like my son. Ain't that something? Come on in. Come. Whoa, who are you? I don't know who you are. You don't belong up here. You're not perfect. See, Christ makes us perfect before the throne of God. We get that new body. See, that's when we get that new body. Then we can be, hey, let's go to my Father. Let's go to my Father.
I've always had a vision that we'll stand before Jesus if we're saved. And the judgment from those that aren't saved will be before God. You know, correct? We'll be before God.
That will be before Jesus, both. He is the judge. Because remember, when you read that scroll from Isaiah to come and save those that are lost, and he stopped reading and wrote it up, because the next one, and to judge. And you see, He's going to rule with a rod of iron. Jesus, when He comes back, He's not coming to serve, He's coming to rule. And it is Jesus that will say, I never knew you. Whew. Think about that. Think about that. And what Paul is saying, the thing that matters is faith expressing itself through love. Though salvation is by faith apart from works, faith that is genuine will produce works through love. Ain't that what James says? I'll show you my faith through works. Man, that's profound. That's profound. Verse 7 through 10. Ye did run well. Who did hinder you that you should not obey the truth? This persuasion cometh not of him that calleth you. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Boy, we've heard that one, ain't we? I have confidence in you through the Lord, that ye will be none otherwise minded. But he that troubleth you shall bear his judgment, whosoever he be. So Paul's using a familiar metaphor that he uses in the New Testament, a race. And he's talking to the Galatians like, hey, you started that race, man. You were doing so good. You were wide open towards the finish line. You had started. Who came and hindered you? Who came and got in your way? Those Judaizers, right? They came and started hindering them from the race that they were running. Now, there were several Judaizers, a group of them that went. But when you look at the original text here, Paul is talking about a singular person, a leader. And he's like, I don't know who that person is that's leading these other Judaizers and coming and infiltrating your churches. But Paul seems to focus on that one individual, and he's probably the leader of that group. The false teaching this leader was spreading was not from God, who had called them by and into grace. And that's what he's saying there. This persuasion cometh not of him that calleth you. God called you into grace through faith. He didn't call you into all that stuff they're telling you to do. And that's what Paul's saying there in that one verse. We find here the familiar phrase, a little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. What does that mean? One bad apple will ruin the whole bunch, right? Do you think sometimes in churches today you can have unity, fellowship, and then one individual can ruin it?
Yes.
Absolutely. Can it ruin a church?
Yes.
Yes. What does the Bible say to do with leaven? If it don't turn to unleavened, cut it out, because it'll ruin the whole lump, right? So we look at the New Testament, and we're supposed to uplift one another. So if you have somebody in your church that is just a divider, does not like unity, argues, quabbles, whatever, it can ruin a church. We're to go to them in love to correct according to the Scriptures, out of love. And we do our best. But if that person will not conform, get out. I firmly believe that sometimes Jesus or God will take them out. He'll help them get right on out the door and go on down the road. Sometimes He helps the church. Other times He's like, what are you going to do about it? Sometimes it's a test of us and what we do about it. How are you going to handle this, right? I like it when He does it. So much better, I tell you. Let's see. He said a group of believers have to be on guard against leaven in a church. If not, false doctrines can sneak in. In addition, the point Paul was trying to make was probably the fact that a small deviation from the truth could destroy the entire system if a church is not on guard. In verse 10, Paul shares his confidence that the Galatians would share his view and that the leading false teacher would suffer his due judgment. So that was encouraging words from Paul in that letter saying, look, I know y'all are going to do the right thing. I know when you just stop and really think about what you've been taught from me and what the gospel really is, you'll see the fallacy that leader is spewing, and you'll do the right thing. What's that?
In the letter. Why didn't he just call him?
He probably didn't know who it was. He didn't know who it was. It seems to be somebody that he didn't know. Somebody just went in there. So somebody he didn't know. Because I think he would have called him out. But yeah. Verses 11 and 12. And I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? Then is the offense of the cross ceased? I would they were even cut off which trouble you. What's that saying, Sister Nancy?
You can put it in better words.
I can put it in better words.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. In verse 11, it appears the Judaizers had told the Galatians that Paul was also still preaching circumcision. You ever had somebody use your name saying you supported something and you're like, no, I do not. I never said that. Yes. When you look here, and Paul in verse 11 says, and I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? So he had gotten word that those Judaizers was like, look, even Paul supports circumcision. You know what they were probably doing? He did have Timothy circumcised. Right, but did he have Timothy circumcised for Timothy's salvation? No. They tried to use, and then also, did Paul at one time support circumcision? Yes, he did when he was Saul, right, of Tarsus. When he was persecuted, yeah, he really believed in circumcision. But they were using it and twisting it to try to get their following. Well, if Paul agrees with it, then we're going to agree with it.
They didn't want to lose control.
Exactly.
That's all that.
They were trying to gain control, and they were manipulating is what they were doing. And so Paul found this accusation ridiculous and asked why would he suffer persecution from the Judaizers if he was preaching circumcision, which they agreed with. Well, if they're telling you that I'm supporting circumcision, why are they so against me? Doesn't make sense. Wake up, people. It does. That's in Dewayne Noble's term. If I'd have wrote it, wake up, church. What in the world? That doesn't make sense. Does not compute, right? And if he was preaching circumcision, why would he preach Christ on the cross? That's what he's saying here. Now in verse 12, it definitely talks about Paul's bluntness. He says, I would that they were even cut off which trouble you. I'm just going to read what I wrote. That way I won't deviate. Basically, he wished the Judaizers, who were so enthusiastic about circumcision, would go the whole way and castrate themselves. Just go ahead, finish the job, cut it all off. That's Paul. He was blunt, was he not? This would be in line with pagan priests of the cult of Cybele in Asia Minor. See, in Asia Minor, those false gods, they'd have you cut yourself and do all that pagan ritual, shedding blood and all of that. And then I wrote, perhaps Paul thought that doing such a thing physically would prevent them from spreading false doctrines, recruiting new converts. If they were physically impaired, people wouldn't listen to them. Hey, it might help. Tell them to go ahead and finish the job, Although circumcision, you ladies are wrong. All right. Although circumcision had been a sign of the covenant with Israel, it now had no more meaning than any other ritual of cutting and marking practices by ancient pagans. There was no purpose in circumcision after Christ died on that cross. None. Verse 13 through 15. For, brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. But if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another. Now, there was something very important that Paul needed to stress to the Galatians when he's been talking about Christian liberty. What do you think that is? Not backbiting. For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. What does liberty mean? Freedom. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh. What does that mean? To do what you want to do, right? Hey, now that Christ has freed me, now that I'm not under a law, and where there is no law, there is no transgression, right? If there's no law, there can be no sin. I'm not under any law, so I can't sin. I can do whatever I want to do. See, Paul had to be very careful. Pastor Dewayne has to be very careful how he preaches liberty. Because there are some sheeple that will be like, we can do whatever we want to do. Jesus is saving us. I'm going to party like it's 1999. Wrong. That's not, that you're not to lose. That's not how God intended you to use your liberty. If you go and pay to get somebody out of jail and they're like, hey, I'm out of jail, I'm going to go rob another car. Well, no, that's not why I freed you. That's not what we're to do. Are we in liberty? Yes, we are. Are we under the law? No, we are not. And Paul, even in other books, says, So does this mean we can sin? God forbid. That's not why you've been given liberty.
Given liberty to walk in the Spirit.
You've been to love others. You walk in love, not of the flesh, but out of love. And that fulfills the commandments. They're fulfilled within that. It's not a license to sin. And that's one of the biggest arguments that people that preach you can lose your salvation when you sin. They'll say, hey, them once saved, always saved people. They tell you can go out there and do anything. They're living life. And that's embarrassing. If you are a child of God and you've been called into liberty, if you're out there feeding the flesh and sinning, what are you doing? You're doing it wrong. That's not why God freed you. That's not why Jesus died on that cross. Jesus didn't die on that cross so you could go out there and be disobedient. He died on that cross so that you could be free to worship Him, to have a relationship with Him. Not a license to go make yourself feel better. Liberty should be used for love and not lust or other selfish, sinful desires. Although believers are not in bondage to the law or the sinful nature, we are to be in bondage one to another. Did you know that? Paul uses Old Testament scripture to support his statement. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. It reads, "Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people. But thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord." Which means this is final. Israel, your fellow Israelites, your fellow Jews, don't you hold grudges and stuff against them. You're in this together. You forgive. I have spoken. I am the Lord. He made that final. So church, we are children of God. So we are to love one another. Be quick to forgive. Love our neighbors. This idea supports that Christian love is the fulfillment or the carrying out of the law. You see, when you love others, when you genuinely love others, you are fulfilling the law. Did you know that? See, Christ, did He fulfill the law? Yes. He sure did. He loved. Let's go to Romans chapter 13. We're going to run to Romans a few minutes if that's okay. I like that run and Romans starts with R. It makes it sound better, don't it? Romans chapter 13, and I'm going to read 8 through 10. Romans 13, 8 through 10. Now, did y'all just hear what I was saying? Tell me if this sounds familiar. Verse 8. "Owe no man anything but to love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor, therefore love is the fulfillment of the law." There it is. There it is. The entire law summarized in love. The idea, I got that. Because of the infighting of the Galatian churches caused by false teachers, the church had become divided and enraged in bitter strife. You see, there were some people in the Galatian churches that were like, no, Paul taught us different than this. Paul said we didn't have to be circumcised. Paul said us Gentiles didn't have to do that, and I don't want to do that. I've been set free. And then there were other ones like, hey, these Judaizers, they're Jews. They know God better than anybody, and they're telling us that we need to be circumcised. And it caused strife in the church, and there was arguing and backbiting, and it was starting to cause a division in the churches. And so Paul had to address that. The followers of the Judaizers and those that remained loyal to Paul's teachings were biting and devouring one another. This was far from the ideal of believers fellowshipping with one another in love and unity. That's not how Christians are to be. We are not to fight with one another. These feuds would destroy a church, and not only that, the testimony. Can you imagine when a church tears itself apart and that community that's remaining goes out and tries to spread the gospel? Oh, I saw your gospel all right over there at that church. Is that what Christ is all about? I don't want nothing to do with that. I heard what y'all did. It ruins the testimony. And so Paul was like, look, stop doing that. Don't do that. Verse 16 through 18, and then we'll finish up here. This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. But if ye be led by the Spirit, ye are not under the law. Whew, a lot going on there. The answer to such strife is mentioned that we were talking about in that church. He's saying, walk by the Spirit. Choose to walk by the Spirit. Although believers still have sinful flesh, they have a choice. I've been telling Christians that. You have a choice now. Before you didn't. You were just condemned. You had no choice. You were a slave. But now you have a choice. You can listen to the Spirit, or you can listen to your flesh. Which one will you choose? Do you still get angry? Yes. But do you have a choice? Yes. Can you turn the other cheek and forgive? Yes. Can you also strike back and get revenge? Yes. Which one will you do? Paul's saying choose the first one. Choose the Spirit. Your flesh don't like that. It's in contrast with the Spirit. And the Spirit don't like what the flesh wants to do. They're contrast. They don't desire the same things. As Christians, we do not have to give in to sin. We can experience victory with the Spirit's help. In verse 17, Paul explains the two natures that are found in believers. The sinful nature, which we have from birth, and the new nature. That's that new creation whenever we are justified by the blood of Jesus Christ. That's that new nature. That nature that has the Spirit within it and sealed. Both of these natures have desires. What does the sinful nature desire? Evil. Sin, right? That's what it desires. It feels good. The new nature desires holiness. I think I need to preach on holiness. I think some holiness preaching might be coming up. Your flesh won't like it. I'm just going to tell you. Your flesh will be mad as fire at Pastor Dewayne if I really preached holiness to you. Holiness. You want to go before God? Are you dressed the right way? Oh, well, we got the blood of Christ on us and we're... Okay, yeah, you're right. He sees Christ's righteousness and stuff. But there's a way of living called holiness. And God is saying, look, my Son saved you. For the purposes of you being transformed into His image. He don't look like that. And if y'all want to know what holiness is, guess what? It's all in the New and the Old Testament. You can read all about it, men and women. You want to know what holiness is? You may not want to read it. Those things I want to do, I don't. I want to know what holiness is. You sure about that? You start reading in the New Testament what Paul has to say about women. That's not what the world teaches today, right? I'm going to continue on. I'm not preaching tonight. I'm teaching. Living a godly life is not accomplished under the law. Did you hear me? Living a godly life doesn't mean you're coming to church every Sunday. Something you do. Living a godly life is not paying tithes. Living a godly life is accomplished by living a life led by the Spirit. That's the difference. Not works, by the Spirit. And guess what the Spirit's telling you to do? Love. Love everyone. Tell them the good news. Love them. Forgive them. We can go into the fruits of the Spirit, right? Which is coming up here. So that's where we're at. Been taught a lot, and I'm going to read this again like I said, and I want you to pay attention and think about what I taught tonight. Think about what you've learned and see if it applies now. See if you can understand these verses better, okay? Stand fast therein in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if you be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to do the whole law. Christ is become of no effect unto you, whosoever of you are justified by the law. Ye are fallen from grace. For we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. For in Jesus Christ neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. Ye did run well. Who did hinder you that you should not obey the truth? This persuasion cometh not of him that calleth you. A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. I have confidence in you through the Lord, that ye will be none otherwise minded. But he that troubleth you shall bear his judgment, whosoever he be. And I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? This is the offense of the cross. Then is the offense of the cross ceased. I would they were even cut off which troubleth you. For brethren, ye have not been called unto liberty. You have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. But if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another. This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to the other, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would. But if ye be led by the Spirit, ye are not under the law. Does that make sense now? Good. Good. Questions on tonight? Next week, we're going to look at the fruits of, well, you can call it fruit. We can call it the rotten apples of the flesh. How about that? The rotten fruit of the flesh, and then we'll look at the fruits of the Spirit as well. If there's no questions, I'll ask everybody to please stand. I appreciate your attention. I pray that something has been said that lives with you forever, all eternity, and that will help you draw closer to God.